freedom fighters, comrades and friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to Accra and to this conference of African freedom fighters and supporters of the growing movement for Africa's liberation and unity. It is good for our cause to have a periodic meeting of this kind to examine our position in the great struggle to rid Africa completely and forever of imperialism and its handmaidens, colonialism and neo-colonialism. Africa is rich and not poor. As the great wealth that has been taken out of our continent over 5 centuries of spoliation and extortion very well proves. Africa has immense actual and potential wealth: gold, diamond, copper, manganese, bauxite, iron ore, uranium, asbestos, chrome, cobalt, a host of other minerals. Our essential agricultural produce have all been drained away by colonialist imperialism. Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their lands. If we are being baited to enter a European community, we must have something that community needs, and needs badly, when it pretends to offer a bonus by way of aid. When Greeks come bearing grapes, should we not look them well in the mouth? If I may mix my metaphor. But I'm sure you get my meaning. I raise this point so that it will stay in your minds when you may be tempted by the seductive promises of neo-colonialism to forget the real character of colonialist imperialism and be persuaded away from your own true interests and those of Africa. For today, we must each see ourselves as part of Africa in order that we may face colonialist imperialism and its new form, neo-colonialism, on a continent-wide front. This requires some plain speaking. And for the sake of Africa, let us speak plainly. As I see it, our greatest danger stems from disunity and the inability to see that the realization of our hopes and aspirations, the realization of our objective of total African independence, and of our future progress and prosperity is inextricably bound up with the necessity to unify our policy and actions in connection with the continued struggle for independence and the greater task of economic and social reconstruction beyond it. We must therefore face the issue of African unity now, for only unity will make the artificial boundaries and regional demarcations imposed by colonialism obsolete and superfluous. African unity will thus provide an effective remedy for border disputes and internecine troubles. In a united Africa, there could be no frontier claims between Ethiopia and Somalia, or between Zanzibar and Kenya, Guinea or Liberia, or between Ghana, Togoland and the Ivory Coast. Because we would regard ourselves as one great continental family of nations. Some of the leaders, it must be confessed, do not see the struggle of their brother Africans as part of their own struggle. Even if they did, they would not be free to express their solidarity. These rifts are consciously created by the imperialists between the Africans, where they can sit back and watch with sly satisfaction, as well as contempt for those who fail to see how they are being used against Africa's best interests. Regrettably, those states include some who were among the freedom fighters of yesterday and who haven't won their independence, are willing to drop it for some token aid, and thereby deny to those still struggling for freedom even their moral support. Here is a phenomenon against which all African freedom fighters must be on their guard and resist to the utmost. Even though I appreciate the difficulties facing us, I must admit, I find it strange to watch some of us returning willingly to the colonialist fold. This time, they don't even have the excuse of being forced to subject themselves to foreign domination. It makes one wonder why so much effort and sacrifice and so many lives were given up to the achievement of independence in the first place, if it can only be so quickly and easily surrendered. We must begin to build immediately our own continental common market. For it is easy for anyone who studies the common market organization closely to realize that the common market is aimed at harnessing the African countries to satisfy the profit lust of the imperialist bloc and to prevent us from following an independent neutralist policy. It is easy to see that the imperialists and the colonialists are determined to retain the African countries in the position of suppliers of cheap raw materials. If we do not resist this threat, and if we throw in our lot with the common market, we shall doom the economy of Africa to a state of perpetual subjection to the economy of Western Europe. This will, of course, hinder the industrialization of our young African states. It is impossible to think of economic development and national independence without possessing an unfettered capacity for maintaining a strong industrial power. The activities of the common market are therefore fraught with dangerous political and economic consequences for the independent African states. The organization constitutes an attempt to replace the old system of colonial exploitation by a new system of collective colonialism, which will be stronger and more dangerous than the old evils we are striving to liquidate from our continent. This is another reason why we should come together in a unified African economic plan, which, operating on a continental scale, can make a solid attack on the imperialist domination in Africa. We should, without delay, aim at the creation of a joint African military command. There is little wisdom in our present separate effort to build up and maintain defense forces, which, in any case, would be ineffective in a major world conflict. If we examine this problem realistically, we would ask, which single African state could protect itself against an imperialist aggressor? And how much more difficult this would be when some states are allowing the imperialists to maintain bases on their territories. I have already referred to the military forces which South Africa is raising and the danger it poses for the new African states and the struggle of those still in chains. Only our unity can provide us with anything like adequate protection. Those problems can best be met within a unified Africa. And it should be possible in the higher reaches of our endeavor to devise a constitutional structure which will secure the objectives I have outlined, and yet preserve the sovereignty of each of the countries joining the Union. Countries within the Union will naturally maintain their own constitutions, continue to use their own national emblems and national anthems and other symbols and paraphernalia of sovereignty. Regional associations and territorial groupings can only be other forms of balkanization unless they are conceived within the framework of a continental union. There are existing models which we can modify or adapt to our pattern. The United States of America, the Soviet Union, India and China have proved the efficacy of unions embracing large stretches of land and population. Long live African freedom fighters. Long live African independence. Long live your struggle. And long live African unity.
And share this video with friends and family to support the channel.
Well, while you listen to the video, you could clearly see that Kwame Nkrumah wanted unity among Africans. He championed Pan-Africanism. He also championed advocating for unity for people from the black community or Africans in general. He also talked about combating colonialism, which was still the needle which was in the wound of Africans. And he was still coming up with ways of combating these. He also promoted economic separation. So Julius Malema did a lot for the Africans. And I feel it is our duty as Africans to always remember this, to always know that Julius Malema did great things for Africa. Remember, he built a dam which served some African countries, which was not only Ghana, but also some African countries. And he is the leader who died and people really felt his loss. Until today, Africa still has a wound. That is Kwame Nkrumah. And today, this page has helped us see where we've come from. We as Africans, we as people with the black descent. Remember, he didn't only champion for Africans in the Africa, he also championed for Africans in the diaspora. Remember our brothers and sisters in the United States who were taken with the slave ships. He also championed fighting for them to come back. He championed to talk about people from the black descent to come together. And today, the world, I feel like, should celebrate Kwame Nkrumah for the things that he did for Africans. And I take this chance to say thank you to the late Kwame Nkrumah. Actually, he played a major role uniting African leaders, making them come together, providing unity and strategies to combat colonialism. And he was ready to fight to death to bring back Africans' freedom. And I believe that all he ever wanted is for the good, for the Africans, for the good, for the people of black descent. This speech, which he did 60 years ago, I feel like, it's so relevant today for we as Africans. It is so relevant for us, people from the black community. It is so relevant how this leader could come up with these ways and unite Africans. Remember, he united with the likes of Jomo Kenyatta from our own country, Kenya. He stood with Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. He collaborated with a number of leaders, and he also supplied weapons during the wars, arms, ammunition during colonialism to other parts of Africa so that we can fight together, so that we can fight for our freedom as Africans, as people from the black descent. What a great leader. I mean, let's think about the things that Kwame Nkrumah did for us. I think we should be so grateful for the leader that stood up with Ghana till Ghana got independence. That's our leader, Kwame Nkrumah. Coming up with the mindset, with the power of bringing different leaders together and fighting, that was a genius thing, which I don't think leaders are trying to do it right now. It is only for people like the likes of Julius Malema who is trying to embrace that. And Kwame Nkrumah has come so far with Africa, and it always pains me as an upcoming Pan-Africanism. It always pains me as an African who understands history very well that people are forgetting about Kwame Nkrumah and the things that he said about Africa. Remember, he manifested the one Africa which Julius Malema of South Africa today is talking about. So as we think about Africa, we should not forget about Kwame Nkrumah and the roles that he played for people of African descent. It is so painful to forget about such kind of an Nkrumah. He was a history. He was a living history amongst Ghanaians. He was a living history about Africans. It wasn't only for the Ghanaians. Come on, guys. It was also for the Africans, because all he ever wanted, as I have always been saying, it is for the unity of people. And I remember in one of his speech, he said that Africa will not achieve total freedom or liberation until we, people from the African descent, come together. Hearing those words, as a young Pan-Africanist, who is always trying to integrate people from the black community together, as a black person, as a person who understands who they come from, as a person who understands their culture, as a person who understands that the black race has always been marginalized, the black race has always been looked down upon. Kwame Nkrumah, in that time where colonialism was a big thing in Africa, where racism was a big problem for the people of the black community, he stood with us. He played a big role to ensure that we, people from the black descent, we Africans in Africa, we were protected and our rights were spoken to. And he attended to every African. He attended African conference. He was the leader of OAU, Organization of African Union, today African Union. And looking at the roles that he did for the Africans keeps me reminiscing the great things and how leader Kwame Nkrumah was. And so guys, if you reached until this point, kindly, if you're watching the video for the first time, ensure to subscribe to my channel. This is Eugene from Kenya. Peace, love and harmony. One Africa, one unity, because we are one people. Peace, love and harmony. Salute.